Well, it's the biggest story in town. It turns out American President Donald Trump was onto something.
Where are you from?
BBC.
Okay. Here's another beauty.
It's a good line. Impartial, free and fair.
Yeah, sure.
Well, that criticism of the BBC and John Sopel, who was talking to there, apparently was well-founded, because the so-called impartial and accurate public service broadcaster is nothing but.
All right, well, today I want to discuss the potential $1 billion lawsuit that could be looming between President Trump and the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, after Trump has rejected the network's apology for misconstruing his words during the 2024 election and is looking, after all, to take this matter to court. Now, this is widely being framed as just another legal battle between Trump and a media organization, but to me, it's much bigger than that. It is actually the scandalous story of how the British government tried to use the largest media organization on earth to interfere in our country's presidential elections. Now, some people are going to argue that's not the case, but I'm going to say that, after all, if it was the biggest scandal in history, that, for instance, the Russians, hey, remember them, right, spent $50,000 on Facebook posts that were ultimately totally inconsequential in the 2016 election, then where's the scandal here, right? Where's the special counsel against the Democrats, the widespread accusation that they were colluding with the British, right? But of course, we know we live in a two-tiered country, but that is exactly what Trump is trying to fix here. And that's why I say, again, this is not just about a defamation lawsuit. This is actually a global battle against the very globalist agenda that is both trying to influence this country, but across many parts of the West, we're kind of doing them a favor as well. So we'll get into this full story here again, guys, between Trump and the British Broadcasting Corporation. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is not only the best way to support our work, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And to start off, the context. Where did this all come from? Well, shortly before the 2024 election, the BBC tried to air this footage in a documentary talking about January 6th, which tried to show that, hey, Trump was inciting the riot that day, but conveniently left out the very key part that, by the way, most Democrats did in the impeachment fight as well, that he said, and I quote, right, peacefully and patriotically. So here's what the BBC aired versus the original clip, and you can kind of clearly understand where the lawsuit's already coming from.
We're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
Right, so it's not hard to tell what they were trying to do. They were attempting to stitch up the speech to make it look like Trump was trying to incite violence that day, when, again, he was not. And by the way, the BBC is far from alone. The European Broadcasting Union also deceptively edited this very clip like the BBC to make it look like Trump was calling for that insurrection. This came from the Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation, and they're a state-run public broadcasting company, which is part of, yes, the European Broadcasting Union. So it seems like this story goes even wider than necessarily the UK. Isn't that really interesting how foreign state media was trying to interfere with our elections, could you say? Take a listen to that as well.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Det som Donald Trump sa her, tok folk helt bokstavelig.
Right, and we all remember that, I assume. I'm sure there are many Democrat voters out there who genuinely have never heard those words in their lives because they sit around and watch MSNBC all day, but that's important to point out. So with all of that in mind, what's happening now? Well, Trump threatened that $1 billion lawsuit. The BBC has since apologized to Trump and pulled the documentary off of the air and off of all like the streaming services and stuff, but are still refusing to pay the compensation Trump is asking for, which is why Trump is now looking to move forward and take this matter to court. So here are those details. The BBC has apologized to U.S. President Donald Trump for a panorama episode that spliced parts of his January 6, 2021 speech together, but rejected his demands for compensation. The corporation said the edit had given the mistaken impression that President Trump had made a direct call for violent action and said it would not show the 2024 program again. So they're admitting exactly what we were saying and what their intent was this entire time. Let us intentionally lie and mislead. And again, I bring up, isn't that just so coincidental? It wasn't part of any American history documentary or something. It was a 2024 program, right? But anyways, lawyers for Trump have threatened to sue the BBC for $1 billion or 759 pounds in damages unless the corporation issues a retraction, apologizes, and compensates him with at least something. Now, Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy told BBC Breakfast that she was confident the corporation was, quote, gripping this with the seriousness it demands, adding that her role was to ensure the highest standards are upheld, whatever on earth that is supposed to mean. Okay, but that's their backtracking here, admitting that they screwed up. They didn't screw up. They intentionally did this, and I'm sure many Europeans never thought Trump was going to win the election because they're liberal and their media is so liberal, etc. But they were shocked. Oh, shoot, like he actually won, and now he's going to have some power, and he might try to take international action against us. But she also told BBC's Radio 4 program that the editorial standards and guidelines of the BBC were, quote, in some cases not robust enough, and in other cases not consistently applied, adding that there would need to be people at a very senior level with a journalistic background. Again, I don't know what any of this means, okay? Your word salad, I don't know, let me ask the audience, is this word salad satisfying to you? But, that's it, all right? So, political appointments to the corporation's board would be examined in the BBC's charter review, she said, in response to a question asking if member Sir Robbie Gibb, a former political advisor to Theresa May, you may remember that is an old British Prime Minister, had overstepped his remit and waded into politics. Well, that is, again, to me, a very pertinent question considering, again, the BBC is publicly funded. We'll get more into this in a second. But, I understand the UK has slightly different standards than us, but our system is overall similar. And so generally, yes, when you're dealing with publicly funded things, they're supposed to be nonpartisan. But I think you're seeing proof here of the BBC being extremely partisan. We'll weigh in that in a second. But first, here are other kind of the reactions of the British political class. While this was a matter for the board and chairman, she said those appointments, quote, damage confidence and trust in the BBC's impartiality. Gee, you don't say. Now, the leader of the Liberal Democrat Party in the UK, Sir Ed Davey, had urged the Prime Minister on Thursday to get on the phone with Trump and put a stop to his lawsuit threat and, quote, defend the impartiality and independence of the BBC. So they're urging the Prime Minister to try to talk Trump essentially off this ledge. And notice this headline, right? Impartiality and independence of the BBC. That's very important. We'll address it in a second. But you heard similar rhetoric, for instance, from the Labour MP here, Don Butler, saying this is only for financial gain. So you're noticing something here, right? It would seem to me the British political establishment, who they claim has nothing to do with BBC, is fighting really hard to preserve BBC. We'll talk about that more. First, take a listen.
Yeah, I think there's other things at play here, right? Donald Trump sees dollar signs and pound signs, and that's really his priority. That clip of the doctored speech wasn't actually shown in America. But I think it's really important that the BBC stays as a public-owned broadcaster.
Right. Okay, well, let's address this argument before we go any further, because it's important, and I'm sure someone's going to come and try to say, Vince, how can you claim that this is a story of the British government interfering in our election if BBC is an independent organization? Because a simple Google search shows they're not technically state-affiliated media because they have, quote-unquote, editorial independence and freedom. They're just heavily funded by the British government. They're just receiving their institution from the British taxpayer. It's like, hold on a second. Do we really believe this, right? First and foremost, I do feel completely in my rights to say that, the BBC is British state media, because after all, you're talking about the very institution that most British citizens are legally mandated. If you own a TV in Britain, some of you guys might not know this, my American audience, all the British audience will know, you're legally mandated to pay the BBC license fee. It is not optional. As a matter of fact, the police will show up at your door if you're not choosing to fund the BBC. So to that I say, that doesn't seem to me to be like a private independent media organization. It looks a lot more like what? State media. And these videos, by the way, are real. This is what actually happens if you don't pay for the BBC as a British citizen.
I live in England and I just got sent a letter in the mail saying that an officer's coming to visit me at my house. And you're probably thinking, Dalla, what? Are you a criminal? Well, it turns out that I am. Why you are being visited? To ensure you have a TV license, and this includes Amazon. You need a license to watch TV. What the kind of rule is that? You can't even watch Netflix on your laptop without needing a license. 170 pounds? Are they taking the piss? Like, Jesus, there's a cost of living crisis. We got wars. We got knife crime and 20,000 phones getting snatched every 14 seconds. And they're coming after me for not paying for a license to watch Game of Thrones while I'm having a rip.
I've got this letter for you to say you've not paid your TV licence.
But I don't need a TV licence.
Yes, you do. You've got a TV.
Well, yes, I have a TV, but I don't watch live or anything like that.
It don't matter. You've got BBC on your TV.
Well, yeah, but I don't watch it. I watch Netflix. I watch YouTube, Amazon.
You still have to pay your TV licence, and you have to let me in the show.
I can't. I'm not going to let you in my house just to see that. I don't need to pay it. All I do is watch Netflix, YouTube, and Amazon. That doesn't mean I have to pay it.
BBC on your TV.
You're on my property, and I need you to leave.
I need to put this through your letterbox.
I'm not going to pay it.
I'm going to put this through your letterbox.
You need to get off my property.
Well, you're watching the government's property.
Well, this is my house.
This is your house, and you're watching BBC in your house.
I'm not watching BBC. Yes, I have it on there. Doesn't mean I'm watching it. Therefore, I don't have to pay a TV licence for something I'm not watching.
If you've got BBC on your TV, you need to pay your licence.
But I'm not watching it.
It doesn't matter. You've got BBC.
I don't see the point of me paying for it.
I'm afraid it's the law. I'm going to post this to you.
So look, I get it. I'm just a dumb, ignorant American. I don't know what I'm talking about. But don't sit there and try to tell me that's not state media, right? When it's, first of all, publicly funded. When secondly, according to members of the British government, what did that one guy say? You're watching the property of the British government. The Labour leader called it publicly owned, right? That is the definition of state media. But lastly, the most telling part, if there is any dispute or maybe contention about it, right? The fact that in North Korea fashion, the government will knock on your door, threaten you, and even maybe arrest you if you do not pay for the state media, if you refuse to watch the government's propaganda, then that's the very definition, ladies and gentlemen, of state media, okay? Don't try to tell me there's editorial independence when the British citizens are forced to pay for it and forced to have it on their TV. It doesn't seem like a very private organization to me now, does that, right? So, of course, rightfully so. Again, that's why I say this is a story of the British government interfering in our elections. You can absolutely connect the BBC to the political class, right? The globalist leaders of that country and many Western countries to this very directly. And why it is, secondly, so fitting that in response to their weak, half-hearted apology here, Trump has essentially said no, and they're still looking forward to move with either an out-of-court settlement or perhaps even taking it to court. Take a listen.
Edit of the president's speech on 6 January 2021, which featured in the program. The BBC has no plans to rebroadcast the documentary Trump: A Second Chance on any BBC platforms. While the BBC sincerely regrets the manner in which the video clip was edited, we strongly disagree. There is a basis for a defamation claim. Fox News contributor Joe Concha joins us now. Hi, Joe. Okay, so today is deadline day because the president gave the BBC until 5 p.m. today to apologize and offer some form of monetary compensation for editing those two clips together that were in reality 50 minutes apart. The BBC has apologized, but they're saying they're not paying up. So now the president is saying this could be even more costly, to the tune of $1 billion if he does choose to sue. What do you think about this situation and what happens next?
Well, Carly, this was a pseudo half-baked apology because they still say that they did what they did and it didn't rise to the level of defamation. Well, of course it did. The BBC intentionally spliced together, to your point, as you brought up, two clips of President Trump that were made 54 minutes apart and put them together, all in an effort to make it appear he personally led a riot at the Capitol on January 6th. They left out the whole peacefully and patriotically part that he said and told his supporters not to do what obviously happened on January 6th. So two top executives at the BBC have resigned as a result of this blatant action. So this apology just ain't going to do it if they truly aren't taking responsibility for what this news organization that, by the way, has existed since basically the end of World War I did. That the president should go through with his lawsuit. And the feeling here is that the BBC will eventually settle the way ABC did, the way CBS did, and other news organizations have, because accountability matters. And by the way, this isn't the first time the BBC has shown its overwhelming bias. During the Israel-Hamas war alone, the BBC had to issue, get this, 215 corrections to its reporting, nearly 2 per week since October 7, 2023.
Right. So here you have a country that is supposedly free and democratic. As a matter of fact, the American left claims their democracy is even more transparent than ours. Really? Where the state media that the citizens are forced to pay for at gunpoint, literally, is heavily biased in a certain direction. It's not exactly very independent. You have hate speech laws. You have people who get arrested regularly for saying something that the government doesn't like on social media or even out in the streets. And yet they look at you like you're crazy if you say the UK is an authoritarian country. Of course it is. And to the British patriots, by the way, you're welcome, right? I think they're actually massively celebrating this because it is so important. It might not be super important to America, but I would argue, I'm going to explain why it is, that the globalist propaganda machine basically be taken down in this fashion. You could almost make the case that this is a bigger move than Trump even abolishing USAID. Because while the BBC might not be super influential in America, let me tell you, in the whole rest of the world, it really is, obviously, as everyone knows. And as you can see the reaction here from the British political establishment, what is that about, right? And why is it that like mainline Labour leaders, Tory leaders, Social Democrats are all coming together saying, we need to protect the BBC, but you're not really hearing a lot from the authentic conservative, nationalist, or right-wing people in this situation. Why is that? Well, it's because, much like the mainstream media in America, who basically loves the Democrats and the Bush Republicans, it's all about protecting the globalist uniparty, right? About gatekeeping basically the ruling class and making sure that they stay in power. There's a little connection there, right? The triangle basically between, the NGO institutions, the education system, the government itself, and the mainstream media. And so that's why I say, right, the BBC is basically a globalist propaganda machine worldwide. And so if Trump can successfully bankrupt them, or at least weaken them and do something substantial to take them down, that is something that both in the UK but also worldwide would be a big blow to that very globalist propaganda machine. Hence why a lot of patriotic British people are frankly cheering on Trump. Hey, take down the corrupt, crooked BBC.
Right. So, Donald Trump is 100% going to sue the BBC, and what a sight to behold that's going to be. The BBC issued a grovelling apology, which is bullshit, saying it was an error in judgment. It's not an error in judgment. They said there was an error in judgment about Jimmy Savile, Hugh Edwards. I mean, the list goes on. And what happened to Jill Dando, BBC? That's all I'm saying. So we're watching a controlled demolition of the British Brainwashing Corporation. Even the Daily Telegraph put out an article this morning yesterday saying that, they've been, grooming people, talking about the trans stuff. You're watching a controlled demolition, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful because the BBC is guilty of crimes against children, crimes against humanity. It's even been siphoning money off of the USAID. Right, so it's not only been funded by British taxpayers and British license payers, which is completely illegal. It's, it's such a con to pay for your own brainwashing. What? Would you like to pay for your own brainwashing? No, not really. Well, if you don't, you're going to go to prison, and here's a van coming down the road with a big thing on top that tells me if you were watching telly. That was what they used to put on the TV. in the 70s and 80s. Do you remember that advert? The van coming down, big grey van, well, it might be in white, going down the road with a beep, 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 beep. Even as a kid, I remember going, oh, Mum, we got to pay the TV licence, we'll go to prison. Fuck the BBC. Fuck the BBC and all those satanic Marxist wankers that work there, right? Oh, my God. It's going to be so beautiful to see it go down.
Right, well, what a great day for the liberation of Great Britain. Because the major organization that you're forced at gunpoint to fund, that was basically helping to gatekeep an authentic right-wing nationalist rise in that country, right? Oh, keep the globalist uniparty in charge, right? Make sure, yeah, you might have a conservative and a Labour Party, but at the end of the day, they're both like globalist liberals, right? So now that's coming down, and you, again, as an American might say, well, why should I care about that, right? You can just let the UK basically implode on itself. But as that guy revealed, and I wasn't even aware of this, I don't know, we could fact check it, but apparently the BBC was also taking money from USAID. I wonder what that's all about, right? One globalist institution in our country funding another globalist institution in their country. And then, again, as an American, why should you care? They took that money, allegedly, and used it to do what? Fund a documentary to interfere in our election as well. See, because this stuff is worldwide. And that's why what happens there ultimately does happen here, you know, and then one affects the other. So that's why, to me, it is actually relevant as an American. Hey, let's not forget, it's not just that the BBC's running propaganda in their country. They're running it worldwide, including in our country. That's why it has to be shut down. That's why it has to be stopped. That's why we have a stake in this battle as well. And so, you know, great day. Let's see what happens. I'm sure it's going to probably end in an out-of-court settlement or something. But I love to see the groveling, and I love to see that Trump is taking this matter of international relations seriously. And by the way, Keir Starmer, you have anything to say about that, buddy? I don't know. I think the British political class should answer for it, right? I'm not mad at the citizens, because I understand a lot of the British citizens right now, as you see in the protests out in the streets, right, are sick of their government. But to the, again, leadership and the political class, what's up with that? You know? Shouldn't they have something to say about this too? Why are they legally mandating their citizens to pay for something that is both biased in their country and biased in this? I don't know, just some thoughts. But anyways, that said, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.